Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video we're going to be talking about the play The Trojan Women by Euripides. So some background information about this play first. As far as Greek drama goes and the career of Euripides, who's one of the major ancient Greek playwrights, this falls roughly in the middle of the canon of his work. So this is happening in 415 BCE. This it's assumed to have been written in the year before, in 416, because it was written during the Peloponnesian War, and it was a response to a specific incident in which there was a mass slaughter of the people on this particular island. It's the island of Milos. If you've ever heard of it's like one of the most famous statues in the world, Venus de Milos. That's talking about that same place, that island. So when you have this mass slaughter, it's a genocide basically, an eradication of this particular civilization. That has a lot of parallels with what happened with the city of Troy when you look at what happens in the space after the Iliad and what you have happening here in this play. So this play by Euripides. So of course he has other plays, but he has a three set, basically a trilogy that involved two other plays as well, and it's also content from the Trojan cycle. Now, when you are thinking of the Trojan cycle, like imagine a timeline that's okay in the very beginning. If you refer back to my video talking about the judgment of Paris. That's when all this stuff starts. So when you have the kidnapping of Helen, or whichever myth, if you believe she went on her own will, whatever, you have that as the beginning of that story. You have 10 years of war in the city of Troy with the Greeks outside the city walls of Troy. And then you have the Trojan horse narrative, in which the Greeks break into the city of Troy by hiding in the wooden horse. And then you have the sacking of Troy. This play is taking place after that night where the whole city of Troy would have been slaughtered, with the exception of these few people. And that is the Queen of Troy, Hecuba, who is your main character here. Now, by the way, there's also another play by Euripides called Hecuba, and it is essentially the exact same story as what you are reading in the Trojan Women, except there are a few more characters, like a few more people die, basically. And there's a more detail about one of the sexual assaults that happens. It's and it was more popular in its own time. The Trojan Women is a really popular play to perform now because it's often done as a response to some sort of warfare or refugee crisis that's happening in our own real world in various countries, not just the States. So you have Hecuba lamenting the fate of herself and the others who are in this play. I'm going to the next slide so you can see who I'm talking about. You essentially have the same four women who were in the final book of the Iliad, who were mourning the corpse of Hector. So you have Hecuba, that was Hector's mother. You have Cassandra, who would have been a sister of Hector. Then you have Andromache, who is or was the wife of Hector. And you also have Helen of Troy. So, depending on which translation you're looking at, basically you have Hecuba talking, then Hecuba talking to Cassandra, then Hecuba again lamenting alone on stage with the chorus, of course, and then talking to Helen or Andromache, and then talking to whichever one of those who she didn't talk to the first time, Helen or Andromache. It depends on the translation. So when this play opens, we begin with some of the Greek gods. And it's interesting because they don't have as large of a presence in this as you see in the Iliad. In the Iliad, the gods and goddesses very present in what's happening. They really control the narrative. But here, it's sort of left to be more like these are the doings of humankind. The like when the Greek soldiers want to throw the infant of Hector, his infant son, off the walls of the city to kill him, so there's no heir to Troy. Um, there's no intervening from the gods and goddesses and these very graphic cases. So you begin with definitely Poseidon on stage, and he's looking at these poor women, and he's mourning the loss of the city of Troy. Now, depending on which translation you read, you should also have Athena. Now, if you're reading the Ellen McLaughlin translation, she does not include Athena on stage. It's only Poseidon. And I think that's a very interesting artistic choice in the translation because if you read that context of what Poseidon and Athena are discussing there in the beginning of the play, if you remember back in the Iliad, well, all the way back to the judgment of Paris, Athena was on the Greek side because Paris shunned her. Paris didn't pick her as one of as the fairest goddess of all, right? So from that point on, she's like, she really has it out for the Trojans because she wasn't the fairest one of all, and so she's bitter. But now she hates the Greeks because someone has been a sexual assault has happened in her temple and that was not cool. She is not okay with that. And it was a Greek doing it to a Trojan woman. And so now she hates the Greeks. And it's so I think McLaughlin's instance of not including Athena on the stage could be it's sort of like someone who only supports something once it finally happens to them instead of having empathy and being supportive from the get-go. So Athena is kind of being called out for that, perhaps. So anyhow, you move from the scene of Poseidon and Athena looking at the ruins of Troy, and then you have a lot of Hecuba mourning the loss of her city, the murder of her husband and several of her children, and also the stress, the pain, the anxiety of what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to my daughters. So we go on with that. We have her interaction with Cassandra, and if you look up the background of Cassandra, Cassandra is known as being described as mad, and but she's really not. It's just that because she would not return her love to the god Apollo, because she wanted to remain a virgin to be a priestess in the temple, he punished her for not sleeping with him by cursing her to always see the future accurately, but no one will ever believe her. And wouldn't that really just drive you crazy if you see imminent danger and harm and you're trying to tell people so you can stop it and they don't believe you? And so when Cassandra comes out on stage in this play, she is in hysteria. She's talking about how she's going to be the bride of Agamemnon, but really she's just going to be like a mistress to him, and she's foreseeing his murder and her murder uh, from his wife. So you have that scene with Cassandra, and you have then Cassandra exits. You have Hecuba lamenting Cassandra, and then we're going to have, depending on again which translation you're reading. That's why I have these asterisks on that top bullet point and the bottom one, because you have different versions of what happens with the gods coming out in the beginning, and different versions of what happens when Helen is on stage. So, with Andromache, Hector's wife, but she really is just depicted as this is the woman who would be married to Hector. They were both just like the best of the best people. And you find out from the Greek messenger Talthybius, who comes out to talk to Andromache. I'm sorry, it's so. What? What's so? We have to take Astyanax, your son, who was the son of Hector. The Greeks have decided that the child must die because we cannot have a Trojan heir, now that the Greeks have sacked the city of Troy. So, with that tragedy forthcoming, when the Greeks take the baby off stage, then usually either after Andromache, or before Andromache, either way, it's usually before the infant has been killed by the Greeks. You have Helen who comes out on stage, and they really hate her. The text is written as if to totally blame Helen. And you can't really tell if even Helen blames herself. It seems like she does, when in fact, the more common narrative is that she was taken against her will. And so all this war that's being blamed on her for being the most beautiful woman in the world, it's really ridiculous and unfair that because as a woman in the ancient world, she couldn't have controlled the actions of the men who took her. And then in the end, when you do have the murder of the baby of Hector's son Astyanax, it's important to notice that he is delivered to Hecuba. The corpse of the infant is on Hector's shield. And that's really interesting because it's like here was the last line of that legacy. And they bury him. They have like this kind of little ritual. It's done differently in different productions, on stage with the child, the dead child. And to bury him like in the shield is sort of as if something about that Trojan legacy is still protected. And when you look at it in a sort of through a theoretical lens, it really is by the mere fact of all the storytelling that keeps going on generation after generation. So remember this timeline here. So if this is happening in the middle of Euripides' career in 415 before Common Era. So if you remember back in my videos on the Iliad, if there really was a Trojan War, we assume it probably happened maybe around 1200 BCE. So that's 800 years before Euripides writes this play. And then the Iliad, we assume to be written in about 800 BCE. So that's 400 years after the Trojan War, if it really happened, and it's about 400 years before Euripides is writing this. Look how many hundreds of years people have been telling this story over and over again. So through that vein of storytelling, that the whole notion of storytelling, it is like a shield for the legacy of the Trojans. Okay, so that's it for the Trojan Women. Thank you for watching.